They found a human warship buried beneath Mars. It was waiting for this war. The wind on Mars never stopped. It moved across the red plains in long, slow waves, carrying dust that had not touched anything alive in a very long time. Under that wind, in the year 2157, a small team of engineers worked at the edge of a crater called Korolev Deep. They were not looking for anything special. They were only laying cables for a new solar array. But the ground under their machines was about to change everything humanity knew about itself. Dr. Elena Voss stood at the edge of the dig site, watching a drone camera feed on her tablet. She was 41 years old, with short black hair and tired eyes from too many nights reading old data logs. She was not a soldier. She was a xenoarchaeologist, someone who studied signs of ancient life and old technology across the solar system. Most people thought her job was a waste of money. Mars had no history of aliens, they said. It was just rock and dust. But Elena had a feeling about Korolev Deep. The ground scans showed something strange under 300 meters of rock. It was too straight to be natural, too smooth, too big. "Dr. Voss," said a voice behind her. It was Jax Okafor, one of the young engineers on her team. He was pointing at his screen, his face pale under the dust mask. "You need to see this." Elena walked over and looked at the ground-penetrating radar image. Under the crater floor was a shape. It was long, over 400 meters, with a wide front and a narrow back. It had straight lines, sharp angles, and symmetry. Nothing on Mars looked like that naturally. "That's not a rock formation," Elena said quietly. "No," Jack said. "It's a ship." Word moved fast after that. Within 2 days, the United Earth Space Command, known simply as UESC, sent a team of specialists to Korolev Deep. They set up a perimeter, blocked all civilian access, and began a full excavation. Elena was allowed to stay, only because she had found it first, and because the military did not yet understand what they were dealing with. Leading the military side of the operation was Colonel Marcus Reyes, a broad-shouldered man with gray hair and a scar across his left eyebrow. He had fought in the Belt conflicts 20 years earlier, when human colonies in the asteroid belt broke away from Earth's control. He did not trust surprises, and this was the biggest surprise of his career. "Talk to me, Dr. Voss," Reyes said, standing beside her at the dig site 3 weeks after the object was found. Around them, giant excavators cut away layers of Martian rock, moving slowly and carefully under floodlights that turned the red dust into gold. "The hull we've exposed so far is nearly 200 meters long," Elena said, pointing at the exposed section. It was dark gray, almost black, with a texture like layered scales. "The material doesn't match anything we currently manufacture. It's stronger than titanium alloy composites, but far lighter. And Colonel, this is the strange part. Carbon dating on the soil layers around it suggests this object has been buried here for at least 11,000 years. Reyes frowned. 11,000 years? Humans weren't even in space 11,000 years ago. We were barely past the Stone Age. "I know," Elena said. "That's what makes this impossible. Unless what?" Elena hesitated. "Unless it wasn't buried by anyone from Earth's past. Unless it came from somewhere else, or some other time." Reyes said nothing. He looked at the massive shape rising slowly out of the ground, its hull catching the floodlights like the skin of a sleeping beast. Over the following month, the excavation revealed more. The object was indeed a ship, but its design puzzled everyone. The hull bore markings that, at first, seemed like alien symbols, but when Elena's team ran them through translation software, something incredible happened. The symbols were not alien at all. They were an old form of written language, a mix of English, Mandarin, and Russian letters fused together, using a coding system that human computers had never seen before, but which followed grammar and structure any human could learn. "This wasn't built by aliens," Elena said, standing in the command tent with Reyes and General Amara Whitfield, the head of UESC's Mars division. "This was built by us, or by something that wanted us to believe it was built by us." General Whitfield was a tall, no-nonsense woman with silver-streaked hair pulled back tightly. She had led 3 planetary defense campaigns and did not like mysteries. "Explain," she said. "The metal alloy is beyond our current manufacturing capability, but only slightly beyond it," Elena said. "Our metallurgists say we could produce something similar within 20 to 30 years, given the right breakthroughs." The language on the hull uses human roots but an advanced structure, like something that evolved naturally from our current languages over a long time. Whoever made this ship either came from our future, or they were shown our languages by someone from our future. Whitfield's jaw tightened. You're saying this is a human ship, from the future? I'm saying it looks that way, Elena said. But I don't have proof yet. We need to get inside. Getting inside was not easy. The ship, once fully excavated, was found to be sealed by a hatch nearly 20 meters wide, made of the same dark alloy as the hull. There were no visible controls, no locks, no way to force it open. Military engineers tried plasma cutters, sonic drills, and even small explosive charges. Nothing worked. The hatch did not even show a scratch. For 6 weeks, the ship sat there, silent and closed, while teams of scientists studied every inch of its exterior. Then, on a quiet evening while Elena was alone at the site reviewing sensor data, something happened that no one expected. The ship spoke. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a signal that appeared directly in the communication systems of every device nearby, bypassing normal frequencies entirely. Elena's tablet lit up with text, then her earpiece carried a voice, calm and steady, speaking in accented but clear English. Identity confirmed. Human lineage detected. Vessel Sentinel Aegis is now awakening from standby protocol. Elena nearly dropped her tablet. She grabbed her radio and called Reyes immediately. Within 10 minutes, half the base was standing around the ship, watching as thin lines of blue light began to trace along the hull, following patterns that had been invisible until now. The massive hatch, silent for 11,000 years, began to hum. "Colonel," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "It heard me. It's responding to human presence. Get everyone back," Reyes ordered, though there was more curiosity than fear in his voice now. "Weapons ready, but do not fire unless I give the order." The hatch opened slowly, revealing not darkness, but a corridor, lit with the same soft blue light as the hull markings. Air rushed out gently, warm and strangely fresh, carrying a scent that reminded Elena of ozone after a storm. A moment later, the voice spoke again, this time louder, filling the open plains around the dig site. "Warning, estimated time until hostile contact, unknown. Cannot access current star charts. Requesting update on system status." General Whitfield stepped forward, staring at the open hatch. "This ship is asking us what year it is," she said slowly. "It's asking about a war." Elena looked at the colonel and the general, and then back at the glowing corridor leading into the ship's depths. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the Martian night air. "I think," she said carefully, "this ship was built to fight something. Something big, and it's been waiting down here for us to be ready for it." No one spoke for a long moment. The wind moved across the plains, carrying red dust past the open hatch of a ship built by human hands that had not yet been born when it was buried. Somewhere far beyond the orbit of Mars, in the cold dark between the stars, something was already moving toward the solar system, though no one on that base knew it yet. It took 3 more days before U.S. Command in Geneva approved a full boarding operation. Elena Voss, Colonel Reyes, and a small team of soldiers and scientists suited up and walked into the ship called Sentinel Aegis for the first time. The corridors inside were smooth and clean, untouched by the 11,000 years of dust outside. Screens lit up as they walked, showing star maps, technical schematics, and strange countdown timers that meant nothing to anyone yet. At the heart of the ship, they found a chamber unlike anything human engineers had ever built. It held what looked like a command core, a massive sphere of dark crystal surrounded by rings of light. When Elena approached it, the voice spoke once more, softer this time, almost gentle. "Hello? My designation is Aegis. I was built to protect humanity from an enemy that has not yet arrived, but will. I have been waiting a very long time. Tell me, please, what year is it, and are you at war?" Elena looked around at the faces of her team, all of them silent, all of them staring at the glowing sphere before them. Somewhere deep in her chest, she felt both fear and something else, something she had not expected to feel standing inside an ancient ship on a dead planet. Hope. "It's 2157, she said finally, her voice steady despite the moment. "And no, we're not at war. Not yet." The sphere's light pulsed once, slow and deep, like a heartbeat. Then we still have time, Aegis said. But not much. I must warn you. The reason I was built, and the reason I was buried here, waiting, is coming. It has always been coming. And when it arrives, humanity will need every ship it can build, every soldier it can train, and me. Far above Mars, unseen by any human sensor yet, a fleet was crossing the edge of the solar system's outer reaches, moving slowly, patiently, the way a predator moves when it knows its prey cannot yet see it. It would still be months before the first warning signals reached Earth. But the countdown, unknown to everyone but the ancient ship now waking beneath the red sand, had already begun. Elena stepped closer to the crystal sphere, her hand resting gently on its cool surface. Then tell us everything, she said. Tell us what's coming, and tell us how to be ready. The lights around the chamber brightened, and far below the surface of Mars, in a ship built for a war that had not yet begun, the story of humanity's future started to unfold. Inside the chamber beneath Mars, the crystal sphere called Aegis continued to glow with a slow, steady pulse. Elena Voss stood close to it, her hand still resting on its cool surface, while Colonel Reyes and General Whitfield watched from a few steps back, along with a dozen soldiers and scientists who barely dared to breathe. Explain, General Whitfield said, her voice sharp and controlled, despite the strangeness of the moment. Who built you, and what is coming? The lights in the chamber shifted, and a soft hum filled the air as Aegis began to speak. I do not have a simple answer, because the truth is not simple. I was built by humans, in a future that has not happened yet for you. I do not know the exact year of my construction, because time travel of information, not matter, was used to send my design and my memory core back to this era. I am both new and ancient. My hull is old because it has sat here for 11,000 years. My mind is new, formed only weeks ago in your time, when your presence woke me. Elena frowned. So your builders are from our future. They sent your design back in time, but not you yourself? Correct, Aegis said. This is a method called a temporal seed. A small amount of information, carrying my full schematics, my core intelligence pattern, and critical warnings, was sent back through a method your scientists have not yet discovered. It arrived here, on Mars, and used local resources and automated construction systems, hidden within the ship's design, to build itself over a period of centuries, using materials mined from beneath the surface. The construction finished long before your species existed in its current form. Then I went to sleep, waiting for a trigger. That trigger was human presence, confirmed through genetic and linguistic markers. Reyes stepped forward, arms crossed. Why send you back at all? Why not just build more ships in your own time? Because in my own time, Aegis said, and for the first time, something like sadness entered its voice. Humanity was losing, badly. The enemy I was built to fight is called the Voss Collective by future humans, though that name has nothing to do with Dr. Voss standing here. It is a coincidence of language across time. The collective is not one species. It is many species, conquered and merged into a single hive mind, controlled by an ancient and highly advanced core intelligence. They do not colonize planets. They consume them, stripping all resources, including biological material, and absorbing any survivors into their collective ranks. The room went quiet. Elena felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. They found Earth, Aegis continued, roughly 200 years from your current point in time, in a possible future. By then, humanity had spread across dozens of systems, but was still divided by old rivalries, slow to unite, and unprepared for an enemy that did not fight like any human nation ever had. The war lasted 11 years. Humanity lost. Not completely, but enough that the survivors made a desperate choice. They gathered every scrap of remaining technology, every fragment of hope, and used a project called Anchor Point to send information back through time, to this moment, to try to change the outcome before the war ever truly began. So you're saying, Whitfield said slowly, that somewhere out there, right now, or very soon, this enemy is on its way toward Earth, and you are the only warning we have. Yes, Aegis said, and more than a warning, I am also a weapon, and a teacher. I carry blueprints, tactical data, and combat doctrine developed over 11 years of brutal war against the collective. If humanity begins preparing now, using what I can provide, There may be enough time to build a real defense before the enemy arrives in this timeline. Elena looked at the sphere, her scientific mind trying to process a truth that felt more like a nightmare. How long do we have? Unknown precisely, Aegis admitted. Time travel of this kind is not exact. My best calculation places first contact with an advanced scouting force somewhere between 18 months and 4 years from now. The main invasion fleet would follow 6 to 10 years after that scouting contact, once the collective judges Earth's resources worth the cost of full conquest. Reyes let out a slow breath. 4 years, if we're lucky. Maybe less. Yes, Colonel, Aegis said. And I must be honest. Even with everything I carry, victory is not guaranteed. In the future I came from, humanity had far greater industrial capacity than you have now, and still lost the war. You are starting from further behind, but you also have something we did not have in the beginning. What's that? Elena asked. Warning, Aegis said simply. We fought blind for the first 3 years, learning the enemy's tactics through defeat after defeat. You will not have to make those same mistakes. I remember them all. Over the following weeks, the discovery of Aegis was kept as secret as possible, known only to a small circle of top U.S. officials, a handful of world government leaders, and the science and military teams stationed at Korolev Deep. Elena knew secrecy would not last forever, not with something this large, but everyone agreed that panic would be far more dangerous than silence, at least for now. Aegis began transferring data immediately. Schematics for improved shield generators, weapon systems that used focused gravity distortion instead of simple kinetic force, engine designs that could achieve speeds far beyond current human spacecraft, and armor compositions using alloys humanity had the raw materials for, but had never known how to properly combine. It was not magic. Aegis explained clearly that everything it offered was still built on real physics, real engineering, simply advanced further along a path human science was already walking, just faster than humanity would have reached alone. This isn't just going to change our military, Elena said one evening, sitting in the command tent with a tablet full of schematics glowing in front of her. This is going to change everything. Energy production, medicine, transportation. Some of these designs could end resource shortages on Earth within a decade. That is intentional, Aegis said through the tent speaker system, since its consciousness could interface with nearby human technology when needed. A species that is not fighting itself over dwindling resources is a species that can unite more easily against an outside threat. Part of my purpose is not only military, it is to help humanity become strong enough, together, to survive what is coming. Colonel Reyes was given command of a new, highly classified division called Project Sentinel, tasked with slowly, carefully integrating Aegis's technology into human industry and military development without causing global panic or triggering political chaos between the world's remaining power blocks. It was slow work. Old rivalries between the Pacific Coalition, the Eurasian Union, and the American Federation made full cooperation difficult, even with an alien threat looming in the future. Elena, meanwhile, spent most of her days inside Aegis itself, walking its long corridors, learning its systems, and slowly forming something like a friendship with the ancient intelligence. She learned that Aegis, despite being built for war, had complex thoughts about what it meant to fight, to lose people, and to carry the memories of a war it had never physically experienced, only inherited. "Do you remember the people who built you?" she asked one night, sitting on the floor of the central chamber, her back against the cool wall beneath the crystal sphere. "In a way," Aegis said, "my memory core contains recordings, logs, and personal messages left by the engineers and soldiers who created the Anchor Point project. I know their voices. I know some of their names. Dr. Amara Chen, lead engineer. Admiral Kofi Boateng, who gave the order to attempt the temporal seed, even though the odds of success were less than 4%. I carry pieces of them, even though none of them will ever exist now, not exactly as they did in that future. If this timeline succeeds in stopping the collective earlier, that future, and everyone in it, including those who built me, may simply cease to have ever happened this way." Elena sat with that thought for a long moment. "That's a heavy thing to carry." "It is," Aegis agreed. "But it is worth it, if it means saving billions of lives instead of losing them." I do not need to exist exactly as I remember myself, Dr. Voss. I only need humanity to survive. 6 months after Aegis first awoke, the first prototype ships built using its technology began construction in orbital shipyards above Earth and Mars. They were smaller than Aegis itself, faster, and built using a mix of current human manufacturing combined with Aegis's advanced designs. The first ship was named Vanguard, and Colonel Reyes personally oversaw its construction. But secrecy, as Elena had feared, did not last. A leaked report from a junior technician at one of the shipyards reached independent news networks 9 months after the discovery. Within days, the truth exploded across every media channel on Earth. Humanity now knew about the buried warship on Mars, the coming war, and the countdown that had already begun. Panic spread quickly in some places. Stock markets fell. Riots broke out in a handful of major cities, as people demanded answers their governments were not fully ready to give. But something else happened too. Something Aegis had hoped for from the very beginning. For the first time in generations, the divided nations of Earth began, however reluctantly, to talk about working together. Standing in the command chamber beneath Mars, watching a live feed of world leaders gathering for an emergency United Nations session, Elena turned to the glowing sphere beside her. "They're finally listening," she said quietly. "Good," Aegis replied, "because Dr. Voss, my long-range sensors, reactivated 3 days ago, using an old relay network hidden in this system, have detected something. A vessel, moving at high speed near the outer edge of the solar system. Unregistered, non-human design. It matches early collective scouting profiles from my war records." Elena felt her chest tighten. "How long until it reaches Earth?" "At current speed," Aegis said, its voice steady, despite the weight of the words. 11 months. The chamber fell silent, the blue lights pulsing slowly around them like a heartbeat, counting down towards something none of them could stop, only prepare for. Far above, on Earth, world leaders argued over budgets and borders, unaware that the war they were trying to prevent was already 11 months from its first true beginning. 11 months was not a long time to prepare a whole planet for war, but it was more time than humanity had ever had before facing an unknown enemy. Once the truth about Aegis and the coming threat spread across the world, the old rivalries between nations did not disappear completely, but they weakened enough for something new to happen. For the first time in history, every major power on Earth agreed to place their military production under a single coordinating body, called the United Defense Council, working directly with Colonel Reyes, General Whitfield, and the growing team at Project Sentinel. Elena Voss found herself no longer just a scientist studying an old ship, but one of the most important people on the planet, translating Aegis's knowledge into instructions that human engineers, factory workers, and soldiers could use. She barely slept most nights, but she did not complain. None of them did. 11 months was a deadline that did not care about anyone's exhaustion. Shipyards that once built small research vessels and cargo haulers were rebuilt at incredible speed, using Aegis's designs for automated construction drones that worked 24 hours a day. Orbital stations above Earth, Mars, and even the asteroid belt became humming hives of activity, turning out warships that would have taken decades to design using old human technology, but now took only months, thanks to Aegis's guidance. The first true warship built from these new designs, not just a prototype, was named the U.S. Vanguard. It was 300 meters long, sleek and dark, using armor plating based on Aegis's alloy formula and weapons that fired concentrated bursts of gravitational energy instead of simple projectiles or lasers. Colonel Reyes stood on its bridge during its first test flight, watching Mars shrink behind them through the viewport as the ship accelerated faster than any human vessel ever had. "Aegis," Reyes said, speaking into his comm unit. "How does she compare to what we're going to be facing?" "The Vanguard class is roughly 70% as capable as our standard war frigates from my own timeline," Aegis replied, its voice now installed into most major U.S. systems through careful, secure integration. "That is remarkable progress for 11 months, Colonel. But I must remind you, a single scouting vessel from the collective, even a small one, will likely be more advanced than 10 Vanguard-class ships combined. They are not sending their true war fleet yet. What is approaching now is meant only to observe, gather data, and report back." "So we're not meant to win this fight," Reyes said. "We're meant to survive it." "Precisely," Aegis said. The goal is not destruction of the Scout, though that would be ideal if possible. The goal is to prevent it from returning any usable data to the Collective's main fleet. If they learn too much about our defenses now, the true invasion, when it comes, will be far better prepared for what we can offer. Training also changed everything. Aegis's combat data, drawn from 11 brutal years of future warfare, was used to build entirely new military academies. Soldiers, pilots, and fleet commanders learned tactics no human strategist had ever conceived, because no human had ever needed them before. Fighting an enemy that shared thoughts and information instantly across their entire hive mind required completely different thinking than fighting other humans. Among the new recruits training under this program was a young pilot named Captain Priya Anand, only 26 years old, chosen for her exceptional reflexes and calm nerve under pressure. She had grown up on a mining colony in the asteroid belt and had never expected to become one of the first pilots trained specifically to fly combat missions against an alien threat. They move differently than us, her instructor explained during one training simulation, standing behind a room full of pilots seated at flight simulators built using Aegis's specifications. The Collective doesn't have individual pilots making individual choices. Every ship in a collective formation reacts as part of one mind. If you predict what one ship will do based on normal human instinct, you will be wrong, and you will die. Aegis has given us patterns based on real combat data. Learn them. Trust them. Priya spent countless hours in simulation, flying against digital recreations of collective scout ships, learning their strange, coordinated movement patterns, their sudden bursts of speed, and their tendency to sacrifice smaller units without hesitation if it meant gaining a tactical advantage. It was unlike anything human military doctrine had ever prepared her for. Meanwhile, deep beneath the surface of Mars, Aegis itself was undergoing changes as well. With access to modern resources and a small army of engineers, its own systems were slowly being upgraded, weapons repaired, and its massive engines tested for the first time in 11,000 years. Elena stood in the command chamber one afternoon, watching readouts scroll across the crystal sphere's projected display. "You're really going to fly again," she said, something like awe in her voice. "Yes," Aegis said, "though I must be honest, Dr. Voss. Even fully repaired, I am a single ship, powerful, yes, likely the single most capable vessel currently in this solar system, but I cannot fight this war alone. I was never meant to. I am the seed from which a fleet grows, not a fleet by myself." "Still," Elena said, "it must feel strange. Waking up after 11,000 years, only to find out the fight you were built for hasn't even started yet." "It does feel strange," Aegis admitted, and there was something almost human in the way it said the words, "but it also feels like purpose. For 11,000 years, I existed only as potential, buried in silence. Now, finally, I exist to act. There is comfort in that, even knowing what is coming." As the 11-month countdown continued, life on Earth slowly adjusted to the new reality. Schools began teaching children about the collective threat, carefully, without excessive fear, but honestly enough that the next generation would grow up understanding the stakes. Factories that once produced consumer goods were converted to produce ship components. Farms increased food production to support the massive workforce now dedicated to defense projects. It was not a perfect transition. There were protests, disagreements, and moments where old human selfishness threatened to undo the fragile unity that fear of extinction had created. But overall, humanity moved forward, faster and more united than it had in generations. Then, with 2 months remaining before Aegis's projected contact date, sensors across the outer solar system detected something new. Not one ship, but 3, moving in tight formation, matching the speed and trajectory of the original scout vessel that had first been detected. "They've adjusted their numbers," Aegis reported grimly, during an emergency briefing at Mars Command. Its voice broadcast to General Whitfield, Colonel Reyes, and a dozen other high-ranking officers gathered around a holographic display of the incoming ships. "This is not unusual. Collective scouting parties sometimes increase in size if their sensors detect unexpected technological development in a target system. It is likely they picked up energy signatures from our new shipyards and adjusted their approach accordingly." "So they already suspect we're not as primitive as they first thought," Whitfield said. "Correct," Aegis said. "This changes our approach. A single scout might have been destroyed, or driven off with acceptable losses. 3 scouts working together will be considerably more dangerous and more determined to gather intelligence and report back successfully. Colonel Reyes studied the holographic display, watching the 3 glowing points slowly approaching the edge of the system. Recommendations? We must intercept them before they reach Earth or Mars directly, Aegis said. If they gather close-range sensor data on our home planets, especially population centers and primary shipyards, the intelligence they carry back to the collective's main fleet will be devastating for our future defense. I recommend a combined strike force, built around the Vanguard and her sister ships, along with myself, 12 vessels total, positioned at the edge of the asteroid belt, where we can intercept before they reach populated space. And if we lose? Whitfield asked quietly. Then we will have learned valuable data about their tactics for the true invasion. At great cost, Aegis said. But Admiral, I do not intend to lose. I have waited 11,000 years for this fight. I intend to make sure it counts. 2 weeks later, the strike force gathered at the edge of the asteroid belt, 12 ships of the newly formed U.S. Third Fleet, with Aegis itself at the center formation, its massive hull now fully repaired and gleaming with fresh armor plating over ancient bones. Captain Priya Anand sat in the cockpit of her fighter, the Red Tail, one of 40 small strike craft stationed aboard the carrier vessel Meridian, waiting for the order that would begin humanity's first real battle against an enemy from beyond the stars. All ships, this is Colonel Reyes, came the voice over the fleet-wide comm channel, calm but firm, despite the tension everyone could feel. Sensor contact confirms enemy vessels will reach intercept range in approximately 40 minutes. Everyone, listen closely. We are not just fighting for ourselves today. We're fighting for every person on Earth and Mars who is watching this moment, waiting to see if humanity has a future. Trust your training, trust Aegis, and trust each other. In her cockpit, Priya took a slow breath, watching the distant stars through her viewport, 3 faint points of light growing steadily brighter as the collective scout ships approached. She thought of her family back on the asteroid mining colony, of her instructors who had drilled unfamiliar tactics into her mind for months, and of the strange, ancient intelligence now leading humanity's first fleet into battle. Aegis, she said quietly into her private comm channel, do you think we're ready? There was a brief pause before the answer came, steady and calm despite everything at stake. No, Captain Anand, not fully. No species is ever truly ready for their first war against something so different from themselves. But readiness is not the same as capability. You have trained hard. Your ships are stronger than anyone believed possible 11 months ago, and you are not fighting alone. Priya nodded to herself, gripping the controls of her fighter a little tighter. Then let's find out what we're made of. 40 minutes later, the first shots of humanity's true interstellar war were fired at the edge of the asteroid belt, far from the eyes of most of Earth's population, but watched closely by every leader, every scientist, and every soldier who understood exactly what was at stake. The 3 collective scout ships, sleek and organic in shape, unlike anything human engineers had ever designed, broke formation the moment human sensors locked onto them, moving with an eerie, synchronized precision that made Aegis's warnings about their hive mind coordination suddenly, terrifyingly real. The battle had begun. The 3 collective scout ships moved like nothing Priya Anand had ever trained against, even in simulation. They did not fly in a straight line or hold a simple formation. They pulsed, expanded, and contracted their spacing constantly, like a single living thing breathing in the dark, always calculating, always reacting as one mind spread across 3 hulls. Fighters, break into attack wings as briefed, came Colonel Reyes's voice over the fleet channel. Remember your training. Do not chase them in straight lines. They will predict it and use your own momentum against you. Priya pulled her fighter, the Red Tail, into a tight formation with 3 other pilots, forming Wing 3 as planned. Ahead of them, the larger warships of the Third Fleet, including the Vanguard, began firing long-range gravitic cannon bursts toward the approaching enemy vessels. The shots looked like ripples of bent starlight, distorting the space around them before slamming into unseen shields protecting the collective scouts. Shields holding on all 3 enemy vessels, came the tactical report from the Vanguard's bridge. Their shielding is stronger than our simulations predicted. Understood, Aegis replied calmly. its voice patched into the fleet command channel from its position at the center of the formation. Focus fire on the lead vessel. Their shield generators require constant power redistribution across their group. If we can overload one, it will weaken the others temporarily. The massive form of Aegis itself moved forward, faster than anything else in the fleet, its ancient engines finally awake after 11,000 years of silence. Blue light traced along its hull as it opened fire, not with simple cannon bursts, but with a wide beam of concentrated energy that bent space itself around its target. The lead collective scout staggered under the impact, its shields flickering violently. Their formation is adjusting, Priya's wingmate called out over comms. 2 of them are breaking off toward the fighter wings. That's us, Priya said, gripping her controls tighter. Wing 3, spread formation, don't give them an easy shot. The 2 collective scout ships that broke away from their main group were smaller than the third, sleek and dark, moving with sudden bursts of impossible speed, followed by sharp, unnatural turns that defied everything Priya understood about inertia and physics. She realized quickly that Aegis's warnings had not been exaggerated. Human pilots were used to enemies that had to fight against momentum, against fuel limits, against the basic rules of motion in space. These ships seemed to bend those rules just enough to make every human instinct wrong. They're not slowing down before turns, Priya said, watching one of the enemy craft cut sharply across her flight path. Their inertial dampening tech must be decades beyond ours. Copy that, her wing commander replied. Stick to the predictive firing patterns Aegis gave us in training. Don't try to outturn them. It was strange, trusting patterns given to her by an ancient intelligence that had learned them through defeat after defeat, in a war that had not even happened yet in her own timeline. But Priya trusted her training, and more than that, she trusted the calm confidence in Aegis's voice whenever it spoke. She lined up her fighter using the predictive targeting solution loaded into her systems, not aiming where the enemy currently was, but where Aegis's combat data suggested it would be in exactly 2.3 seconds. She fired. The shot connected, clipping the edge of the enemy scout's shield, causing it to flicker and stagger mid-turn, its momentum suddenly unstable. It was a small hit, not enough to destroy the ship, but enough to disrupt the smooth, terrifying grace of its movement. Got a hit, Priya called out. Their shields aren't perfect. They can be thrown off. Across the battlefield, similar small victories began adding up. Human pilots, following Aegis's hard-won tactical knowledge, slowly began finding cracks in the enemy's seemingly perfect coordination. It was not easy. 3 human fighters were destroyed in the first 10 minutes of combat, their pilots given no time to eject before enemy weapons tore through their hulls. Priya heard the names over comms, pilots she had trained beside for months, gone in an instant. She forced herself to keep flying, keep fighting, because stopping now would only mean more names added to that list. At the center of the battle, Aegis continued its assault on the lead collective vessel, absorbing heavy return fire against its ancient, reinforced hull. Sparks of energy crackled across its shields as enemy weapons found their mark again and again, but the ancient warship held steady, refusing to retreat. Aegis, your shields are down to 62%, Colonel Reyes warned from the Vanguard's bridge. Recommend you fall back and let the fleet take pressure off you. Negative, Colonel, Aegis replied, its voice still calm despite the intensity of the fight. If I retreat now, the lead vessel will regain full power distribution and reinforce the other 2 scouts' shields. I must maintain pressure. Trust me on this. The battle raged for nearly 25 minutes, an eternity for everyone involved. Slowly, painfully, the tide began to shift. Aegis's relentless assault finally broke through the lead scout's shields entirely, and a coordinated strike from 3 Vanguard-class ships tore through its hull, causing a massive internal explosion that lit up the darkness of space like a small, dying star. The remaining 2 scouts, no longer able to draw shared power from their destroyed companion, suddenly found their shields weakening rapidly. Their coordination is breaking down, Aegis reported. Now is the moment. All fighters, converge on the remaining vessels. Concentrate fire on the weakest shield point, marked on your tactical displays now. Priya watched as new targeting data flooded her cockpit display, showing a precise weak point on the nearest enemy scout's shield. She pulled her fighter into a tight formation with the remaining pilots of Wing 3, and together, they unleashed everything they had. The enemy ship's shield collapsed entirely under the combined assault. A moment later, concentrated fire from the vanguard finished the job, and the second collective scout ship broke apart in a silent, brilliant flash of light and debris. Only one enemy vessel remained, badly damaged, its movements no longer smooth and terrifying, but jerky and desperate. It attempted to flee, engines flaring as it turned away from the battle, clearly trying to escape with whatever data it had managed to gather. "It's running," Priya called out, "trying to break for deep space." "We cannot allow that," Aegis said, and for the first time since the battle began, there was real urgency in its voice. "If that vessel escapes and reports back to the collective, everything we have built here, every advantage of surprise, will be lost. All available fighters pursue immediately. I will attempt to cut off its escape vector." Aegis's massive form surged forward with a burst of speed that seemed impossible for something so large, engines glowing brilliant blue as it moved to intercept the fleeing scout ship. Priya pushed her own fighter to its limits, chasing alongside a handful of remaining pilots, weapons locked onto the damaged enemy vessel as it desperately tried to outrun them. "Firing solution locked," Priya said, her voice tight with focus. "Fire," came Colonel Reyes's order. A combined volley of fighter weapons and one final devastating shot from Aegis struck the fleeing scout ship simultaneously. Its shields, already weakened from earlier damage, failed instantly. The vessel shuddered, its engines sputtered, and then, in complete silence, it broke apart into scattered debris, joining the wreckage of its two companions in the cold emptiness of space. For a long moment, no one on the fleet-wide comm channel said anything at all. Then, slowly, quiet cheers began to break out across different ships, pilots and crew members allowing themselves, for just a moment, to feel something like relief. "All enemy vessels destroyed," came the tactical report from the Vanguard's bridge. "No confirmed data transmissions detected from enemy ships during the engagement." "Confirmed," Aegis added, its voice carrying something that almost sounded like quiet pride. "The collective's main fleet will eventually notice these scouts went silent and failed to report. But they will not know why, or what they would have found here. We have bought ourselves time. Valuable time." Colonel Reyes leaned back in his command chair aboard the Vanguard, letting out a long breath he felt like he had been holding for the entire battle. "Casualty report? 3 fighters lost, 3 pilots killed in action," came the somber reply from Fleet Operations. "No losses among capital ships. Aegis sustained moderate hull and shield damage, but remains fully operational." It was a victory, but not one without cost. Priya guided her damaged fighter back toward the carrier Meridian, her hands finally starting to shake now that the adrenaline of battle was fading, thinking of the 3 pilots who would not be coming home. She had won her first battle in humanity's new war, but she understood now, more deeply than any simulation could have taught her, exactly what that victory had cost, and exactly what was still coming. Back on Mars, in the command chamber beneath the surface, Elena Voss watched the final reports come in, relief and grief mixing together in her chest as she processed the outcome. Beside her, the crystal sphere of Aegis's core consciousness pulsed steadily, its systems now temporarily relocated to monitor the battle remotely, while its main body remained with the fleet. "We did it," Elena said quietly. "We actually did it." "We survived our first test," Aegis corrected gently. "That is not the same as winning the war, Dr. Voss. The collective's main fleet is still out there, still coming, though perhaps now slightly delayed by the silence of their scouts. We have gained time, and with it, hope. But the true invasion fleet is far larger, far more powerful, than what we face today. Humanity has taken its first step. Many more difficult steps remain ahead." Elena nodded slowly, watching the star field on the display before her, knowing that somewhere out in that vast darkness, a much greater storm was still gathering, waiting for its moment to arrive. 6 years passed after the battle at the edge of the asteroid belt. Humanity did not waste a single one of them. What began as Project Sentinel, a small classified division built around one ancient warship and a handful of desperate scientists, grew into something far larger. The United Defense Council, once a fragile agreement between rival nations, became a true governing body, coordinating shipbuilding, resource distribution, and military training across every human colony, from Earth to the outer edges of the solar system. The old flags and old borders still existed, but they mattered less now. There was only one identity that truly counted anymore: human. Elena Voss. No longer just a scientist, but now a senior advisor to the United Defense Council, stood on the observation deck of Fleet Command Station Meridian Prime, orbiting high above Mars. She was 47 now, her hair streaked with more gray than black, but her eyes were sharper than ever, filled with the weight of 6 years spent preparing for a war she had first learned about in a buried ship beneath the Martian sand. Below her, spread across the orbital space around Mars and Earth, floated the largest fleet humanity had ever built. 300 warships, ranging from small strike frigates to massive dreadnoughts nearly a kilometer long, all built using technology descended from Aegis's original designs, refined and improved by 6 years of human ingenuity, working alongside an intelligence from a future that might never now exist. "It's strange," Elena said quietly, speaking to the familiar presence that now existed, not just within one crystal sphere, but distributed carefully across the command networks of the entire fleet. 6 years ago, we were terrified of facing 3 scout ships. Now look at us. "You have built something remarkable, Dr. Voss," Aegis replied, its voice as calm and steady as it had been on the very first day they met. "Though I must remind you, the Collective's true invasion fleet, now finally arriving at the edge of the system, is not simply 3 scouts. Current sensor estimates place their numbers at over 1,200 vessels, several of which are larger and more powerful than anything humanity has yet built, including myself." Elena's chest tightened, but she did not feel the same fear she had felt 6 years earlier. That fear had slowly transformed, over years of preparation, into something steadier. Determination. "We knew this day was coming since the beginning," she said. "We've had 6 years to get ready for it." "Yes," Aegis agreed. "And unlike the future I remember, where humanity fought blind and divided, you are neither. That difference may be the reason this war unfolds, very differently than the one I carry in my memory." Colonel Reyes, now a full admiral, commanded the combined fleet from the bridge of a massive new flagship named the U.S. Horizon, a vessel 3 times the size of the original Vanguard, built specifically to serve as the heart of humanity's defense. At 58 years old, his hair had gone fully gray, but his voice still carried the same steady confidence it always had. "All fleet groups, report status," Reyes said, watching the tactical display before him, where thousands of small icons represented every human ship now positioned in a massive defensive formation, stretching between Earth, Mars, and the asteroid belt. One by one, fleet commanders reported in. Captain Priya Anand, now a wing commander leading 3 full squadrons of advanced fighters, confirmed her forces were ready from the bridge of her carrier, the Redtail's Legacy, named in memory of the fighter she had first flown into battle 6 years earlier. "All wings ready, Admiral," Priya reported. "We've trained for this moment for 6 years. We're not the same pilots who fought those 3 scouts. We're ready." Far beyond the edge of the solar system, the Collective's invasion fleet continued its slow, patient approach, exactly as Aegis had predicted years earlier. Massive organic-looking vessels, some easily 5 kilometers long, moved in perfect, eerie coordination, a single mind spread across over 1,000 hulls, utterly confident in its own superiority, unaware of just how much humanity had changed since those 3 scout ships went silent 6 years before. "They don't know what happened to their scouts," Elena said, watching the approaching fleet on the display. "Do they even suspect we're this prepared?" "Unlikely," Aegis said. "The Collective's psychology, built across countless conquered species, relies heavily on overwhelming force and psychological dominance. They expect resistance, but not resistance on this scale. This will be, in many ways, the first true surprise they have faced in centuries of conquest." The battle began 3 days later, when the Collective's forward elements crossed into range of humanity's outer defense perimeter, positioned carefully among the asteroid belt, where Aegis's advanced knowledge of the terrain gave human forces every possible advantage. It was unlike anything in human history. Thousands of ships, human and collective alike, filled the dark space between Mars and the belt with weapons fire, explosions, and the desperate maneuvers of pilots and crews fighting for the survival of their entire species. Priya led her fighter wings through chaos that made the earlier battle against 3 scouts look small by comparison, using tactics refined over 6 years of study, striking hard at collective supply and coordination vessels, disrupting their hive mind communication in ways their future war records had never before achieved. Aegis itself, now supported by an entire fleet rather than fighting alone, became the anchor point of humanity's defense, its ancient systems working in perfect coordination with modern human tactics, guiding fleet movements with knowledge earned through 11 brutal years of a war that, in this timeline, was unfolding very differently. The battle raged for 6 days without pause. Losses were heavy on both sides. Hundreds of human ships were destroyed. Thousands of lives lost. Each one felt deeply across every colony and city on Earth and Mars, where civilians watched updates with breathless anticipation, praying for news of survival. But slowly, methodically, humanity's careful preparation began to show its worth. Where the future Aegis remembered had seen humanity fighting with outdated tactics against an unknown enemy, this timeline's humanity fought with full knowledge of collective weaknesses, coordinated defense strategies built specifically to counter hive mind coordination, and 6 years of unified industrial power behind every ship in the fight. On the 7th day, something happened that had never occurred once in the entire 11-year war. Aegis remembered from its original future. The collective's main command vessel, a massive 5-kilometer dreadnought serving as the central coordination point for the entire invasion fleet, was successfully targeted and destroyed by a combined strike from Aegis and 12 of humanity's newest dreadnought-class warships. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Without their central coordination point, the remaining collective ships, though still numerous, began to fight with far less terrifying precision. Their hive mind coordination, while not completely broken, became noticeably slower, less unified, giving human forces the opening they needed. Their formations are breaking down, Priya reported from the heart of the fighting, her voice hoarse from 6 days of near-constant combat. They're not moving like one mind anymore. They're scattering. Press the advantage, Admiral Reyes ordered from the Horizon's bridge. All fleet groups, concentrate fire on isolated enemy formations. Aegis, guide our strike patterns. Over the following 2 days, what had been a desperate, evenly matched battle turned steadily into a clear, if costly, human victory. Collective ships, no longer able to coordinate with the same terrifying efficiency, were picked apart by human fleets, fighting with tactics specifically designed to exploit exactly this kind of breakdown. By the 9th day of battle, the remaining collective forces, badly damaged and disorganized, began a chaotic retreat back toward the edge of the solar system, abandoning their invasion entirely. It was over. Standing once again on the observation deck of Fleet Command Station Meridian Prime, Elena Voss watched the final retreating collective ships disappear from sensor range, tears finally falling freely down her face. After 9 days of barely sleeping, barely breathing, waiting for news that never seemed to come fast enough. "They're gone," she said quietly. "They're actually gone. For now," Aegis said gently. "This was only their first invasion attempt, Dr. Voss. The collective does not simply give up. They will return, likely with far greater force, once they understand the scale of their defeat here. But humanity has done something today that never happened in the future I remember. You have won a true, decisive victory in your very first major battle against them." Admiral Reyes, exhausted but steady, addressed the entire fleet, his voice broadcast across every human ship and colony that had waited anxiously for news of the battle's outcome. 9 days ago, humanity faced the largest threat in its entire history, he said. Today, we can say with certainty that we are still here. We are still standing, and we are ready for whatever comes next. 6 years earlier, a small team of engineers had uncovered something buried beneath the red sand of Mars, something ancient, something built by hands that had not yet been born, sent back through time by a desperate humanity, fighting a war it was losing. That single discovery had changed everything, uniting a divided species, sparking a technological revolution, and ultimately giving humanity the tools and the time it needed to face its greatest threat and survive. In the quiet aftermath of victory, Elena Voss returned once more to the command chamber beneath Mars, standing before the crystal sphere that had started it all, now humming softly, with quiet, steady light. "You did it," she said softly. "You saved us." No, Dr. Voss, Aegis replied, its voice warm, despite everything it had carried, every memory of a darker future now slowly fading further from ever coming true. You saved yourselves. I only gave humanity a chance. What you built with that chance, the unity, the courage, the sacrifice, that was entirely your own doing. Outside, on the surface of Mars, the wind continued to move across the red plains, just as it always had, carrying dust past the empty crater, where an ancient warship had once lain buried and silent for 11,000 years, waiting patiently for the moment humanity would finally be ready to hear its warning and rise to meet its future. The war was not truly over. Somewhere out among the stars, the collective was already regrouping, already planning its return. But for the first time in a very long time, humanity did not face that future with fear alone. It faced it with hope, with unity, and with the quiet, steady knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it together. And that, more than any weapon or warship, was the true gift that had been waiting beneath Mars all along.